Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Richard Gullah, President of SEIU Local 1984. I want to thank all of you for joining us today for another event we're holding to encourage member engagement with our presidential candidates. I'm very excited tonight to have Representative Tulsi Gabbard, who has joined us today to talk with us and answer questions, on our Unions for All agenda. We've been working to deliver our Unions for All message to all these presidential candidates, and thankfully Representative Gabbard too shares the vision for standing up for working people in unions. This year, Representative Gabbard and her team engaged with SCA members by showing up to stand in solidarity at Rockingham County when we were organizing workers there. Thank you so much for that. I'd also mention that she's put out a video in support of our contract fight for our executive branch employees. Thank you. She is the first female combat veteran to run for president. One of the first elected to Congress, is a major in the Army National Guard and has served for over 16 years to our country and deployed twice in the Middle East. She has served on the Homeland Security, Foreign Affairs, and Armed Services Committees, in addition to serving as Vice Chair of the Democratic National Committee. She is running to bring a soldier's heart to the White House. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Gabbard.
And for your kind invitation and allowing me this opportunity here to be able to share a little bit with you and to have a conversation about the great work that all of you are doing, that our public workers and union members are doing across this country, and how we can stand together to make sure that we are working side by side, fighting for all the things that we care about for working people all across this country, for that better future that really provides that light of hope and opportunity and justice and equality for all. I want to say a couple of quick thanks here. Melissa, thank you so much for your help and helping us get the word out here. And Chrysaide, I hope I said that right. Was that right? Chrysaida. I was close. Thank you very much for all of your work and working with my team to help make this happen. Really, really appreciate it. I want to start with a little bit of our roots in Hawaii. I know the SCA was founded in the 1940s, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. Here in New Hampshire, is that about right?
Social organization originally, yes.
Okay. Yeah. It evolved over time.
Yeah, so I'm told.
Well, in Hawaii, in my home state of Hawaii, back in the 1940s, life was obviously very different than the Hawaii that we know and love today, in that working people in the state of Hawaii really were working under 4 big corporate bosses. They were big plantation owners who dictated all of the rules and the regulations and the terms of which a lot of immigrants had come to Hawaii to work on those plantations had to live under. As you can imagine, we were people who came from different countries across Asia, from Puerto Rico, from different parts of the world, coming to work in those plantations with terrible working conditions, long hours, very low pay, and a lot of divisiveness being created amongst these different immigrant groups, whereas one group would stand up and say, hey, we need better working conditions. The bosses would say, all right, well, you keep that up, we're going to bring immigrants from this other group to come and take your jobs, pitting one group against the other and inciting this fear and insecurity in people's minds as they are just trying to provide for their families. This continued to go on and on for a long time until all of the different groups of immigrants from different parts of the world stood together. And in our home state, it was the ILWU that was the organizing union that really brought about this huge change in Hawaii. It culminated with over 20,000 of these plantation workers striking together, effectively shutting down the plantations for days until finally they were effective in bringing about the kinds of basic improvements and changes to their working conditions and their pay and their living conditions that they had been fighting for unsuccessfully for so long. And that was a major turning point in our state. That was the beginning of the change of rule from the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and has led to our home state having the highest labor membership per capita, I think, of any state in the country. And really it instilled in us, generations later, growing up in a state like Hawaii, what it means to stand together, to stand in solidarity, to recognize that even as we may come from different places, we may have different stories, backgrounds, things that make us unique, that when we the people make sure that our voices are heard, it's a powerful force. When we are working for the well-being of each other, for our communities, we are a powerful force where we can effectively bring about the kind of change, even when the obstacles may seem insurmountable. And gosh, aren't we facing some big obstacles in the country today? The public service that each of you perform every day, thank you. Thank you. Too often it goes unsaid and unspoken and unsung, but it's the everyday jobs that so many of us, functions that so many of us across the country depend upon, that each of you perform. You're not getting paid enough in so many cases. I know just here, we've been here for the last couple of weeks now, and as we had that first snowstorm that came in right after Thanksgiving, it's your members who are out there working all night long to be able to make sure that those roads were safe for passage. And yet, as I've been told, your union is fighting for fair pay for those who are working so hard and who often get the complaints rather than the thanks that they deserve. This is what we're talking about when we talk about standing in solidarity and appreciating the service that is provided to our communities by union members here and across the country. I served in Hawaii in the state legislature back in 2002. I later served on the Honolulu City Council and have appreciated and been honored by the support of labor unions across different sectors in Hawaii, and am proud of the work that we've done side by side to fight for working people, to overcome many of the challenges and the threats that exist, threatening the many advances that unions have fought for so long, and have continued that work in Congress, doing things like sponsoring the Freedom to Negotiate Act that's currently before this Congress now, standing up against destructive trade deals like the Trans-Pacific Partnership that did not provide protections for our working people, nor did it provide protections for our environment. I've been proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with leaders across the labor movement, once again, putting people first, putting people ahead of profits, putting people ahead of partisan politics, and just getting down to what's real. And what's real is we know that whether you're a teacher or a firefighter or you're plowing snow here in New Hampshire, so often we are told there's just not enough money. There's not enough money for a pay increase, right? And you're into negotiations with your executive branch here in New Hampshire and being stonewalled and probably being told, look, there's just not enough money. Not enough money to go around. Not enough money to pay for the very basic things that we need. Not enough money to make sure we have guaranteed health care for all. Not enough money to ensure that we are paying our teachers what they deserve and our kids are getting the quality education that they need. Not enough money to invest in infrastructure. The list goes on and on. And yet, as we're seeing reported heavily now, just in the last couple of days, as in our communities we are told there is not enough money, somehow there is enough money to squander over $1 trillion of our taxpayer dollars on a regime change war and a follow-on nation-building mission in Afghanistan that we have been lied to about over 3 administrations, that leaders in our own government are questioning to themselves, what the hell are we doing here? What are we trying to accomplish? What is our objective? When will we know that mission is complete? and meanwhile continuing to spend more and more of our taxpayer dollars without any accountability, really, and oversight, while once again in communities like yours here in New Hampshire, like my community in Hawaii, communities all this across the country, are told over and over and over again, there's just not enough money. There's just not enough money to take care of the needs that we have here at home. But there is enough money to build, multi-million-dollar gas stations in Afghanistan that actually aren't functional and nobody can use. There is enough money for the article was talking about a USAID official who was in Afghanistan and charged to spend, their mission was to spend $3 million every single day in the communities that were in their area of responsibility. On what? To reach what objective? I don't know. Spend $3 million a day. Right now, our country is spending $4 billion every month in Afghanistan. $4 billion every month. So I was starting to look up, okay, well, what could we actually do with $4 billion here at home? Here's a couple examples of what I found. $3 billion of 3 months of funding in Afghanistan would cover your New Hampshire's entire annual budget. 3 months of what we spend in Afghanistan would fund the state of New Hampshire at your current operating budget for the entire year. Just want to let that sink in for a minute, because it's hard to wrap your head around over $1 trillion. What does that look like? New Hampshire is on the front lines of the opioid epidemic. It's ravaging so many communities across your state, communities across the country. The FY20 budget for the Department of Health and Human Services to deal with this opioid crisis for the entire year, for the entire country, is $4.8 billion. Nationally. That's just over 1 month of what we spend in Afghanistan. Who here believes that's enough? That's enough to deal with the victims and the families who've been ravaged by this opioid epidemic? It doesn't even come close. It doesn't even come close. Whether you're talking about the recovery beds that are needed for people who are trying to get past this addiction, or you're talking about the follow-on resources that are needed when you're looking at employment and affordable housing and healthcare, it doesn't even come close. So on my campaign, I've made this issue of the cost of war a very central focus, because foreign policy is domestic policy, and this is why. This is a glaring example of why. And while you will hear from a lot of the other candidates who are running for president, I think probably universally we stand united with you, with labor. We stand in solidarity with the issues that we care about most. But I will tell you something that sets me apart from the others, is the experience that I bring to the responsibility that the president has to serve as commander-in-chief of our armed forces. That experience of serving in Congress for 7 years, focused on issues related to national security and foreign policy, serving on the committees, as Rich mentioned, the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Armed Services Committee, Homeland Security Committee, committees where we're providing oversight over the 4-star generals in the military, bringing in the Secretary of Defense and questioning them and holding their feet to the fire, bringing in leaders within the State Department. That experience combined with just the personal experience that I have of serving as a soldier, of serving in Iraq in 2005 during the height of the war, in a medical unit where every single day we were confronted with the terribly high human cost. The terribly high human cost of war. In Afghanistan, 2,433 Americans have lost their lives. I can't even imagine what those parents or husbands and wives and family members and loved ones are going through right now as these documents have been revealed. Being told that we have all been lied to about what their loved ones went and fought for. You have my personal commitment that as President and Commander-in-Chief, I will not be bullied by or influenced by this foreign policy establishment in Washington that has been perpetuating these lies and these endless regime change wars and follow-on nation-building exercises. I will not be bullied by the four-star generals who come into the Oval Office or the military-industrial complex that's been profiting most. Their pockets are full because of things like Afghanistan and this regime change war in Iraq and Syria and these ongoing efforts that we've seen. I have the experience and the background and the conviction and understanding in national security and foreign policy to bring about an end to these regime change wars and the follow-on nation building that always comes. Bring about an end to this new Cold War and this nuclear arms race that's taken more money out of our pockets and communities and making us and the world less safe, and instead redirect our taxpayer dollars towards actually serving the needs of our people, actually investing in the needs of our community. Foreign policy is domestic policy. So as we are fighting for a fair and living wage, as we are fighting for better benefits for our public workers here and across the country, as we are fighting for workers' rights to organize, to be members of a union, this is an issue that is central to our being able to deliver for working people and every American across this country. Thank you for the opportunity for me to be here to share with you the kind of leadership and sea change in our foreign policy that I seek to bring about, so that really together, working side by side, we can bring about that better, brighter future that will provide greater opportunity for our families, our loved ones, our kids, and generations to come. Thank you so much for this time you've given me. I really appreciate it.
All right, Ms. Tracy. Who wants to ask the first question tonight? Dennis, in the back.
Thank you. Is this on?
Yes.
I hear you, loud and clear.
Thank you, Representative. My name's Dennis Etchells. I work for the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. I live up in Guilford in the Lakes region. And I'm also the chairman of the Conservative Committee here at the SEA to bring the voices forward of the Conservative members. Couple of areas of the question in regards to the impeachment and within the last week, with today's announcement of 2 articles being filed, yesterday's, I'm going to call it charades by both parties in the witness becoming prosecutor and outburst on the floors. And then getting back to the jobs report that came out last Friday, where do you stand on the impeachment itself moving forward, seeing how you'll probably be in Washington next week for a vote?
I will. What's your question or connection with the jobs report with the impeachment?
Just that there is improvements happening in the country while the backstabbing is happening between the political parties.
All right. Good question. I've been a little busy on the campaign trail, so I have not been watching the wall-to-wall coverage. I didn't see the showdown that happened yesterday. I've been getting the cliff notes from my staff, and I am very carefully going through the reports and the evidence and the documents and articles that have come out of the Judiciary Committee today before I make a decision about how I will vote when that vote is called. No matter your political party or how you feel about everything that's going on, a vote to impeach a sitting president of the United States is an incredibly serious thing. And I'm taking that responsibility with the seriousness that it deserves. I have, for a long time, before these proceedings even began, expressed concern about the dangerous precedents that pursuing impeachment purely for partisan reasons sets for our country and for our democracy. Where as much as we may disagree with the outcome of the election, if the answer is to say, well, I don't like or agree with the guy who got elected, so let's try to find a reason to impeach because of those partisan differences, then really where does the confidence of the voters lie that the outcome of the election will be respected and that we will work like hell to change the outcome of the next election and beat the person that we didn't support? The divisiveness that we're seeing in our country by a purely partisan approach to impeachment will only continue to get worse. I voted for the inquiry when that vote came to the House floor because I thought that given the limited information we had at that time on the whistleblower report and the other transcripts that came out, that it warranted a further look, a deep dive to look, okay, what are the issues really that are coming to the forefront? Who did what? Who said what? Let's actually gather the evidence. And I said at that time, this needs to be a nonpartisan inquiry that's focused on what's in the best interest of the country. So we, the American people, can make the best determination about the steps to go forward. I'm concerned about how partisan it has become. From what I've seen and from what I've heard and from where we are today, it's difficult to see past the partisanship. And so I have some serious concerns, but I'm doing my due diligence before I make a decision on how I will cast my vote. With regards to the jobs report, with regards to the many other issues that we need to be dealing with in this country, yeah, the jobs reports they're improving, right? There's a lot of very positive jobs reports. People say, hey, the stock market is up. There are some good things happening in this country. Yeah, there are. But I think it's important that we also look to see, how do we improve? How do we better help improve the quality of life of people in this country where many people, even as they may be employed, we have to face the reality that 70 to 80% of people in this country are living paycheck to paycheck. Really, really worried that there is one healthcare emergency or some unforeseen expense that will push them over the edge and make them believe, hey, I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent this month. Or, force them to think about filing bankruptcy because of an unexpected, healthcare, illness, injury, accident, something like that. So, people work in a full-time job that doesn't pay enough. Yeah, they're employed. They're still struggling to survive. So I call it straight as it is. If there are good things happening, that's great. Let's see how we can continue to improve rather than looking at the superficial numbers that are so often reported. Let's actually dig down and look at what's the quality of life of our brothers and sisters across this country. Because no matter your political party, I think we can all agree that we want to make sure that we have a better opportunity and a better life and can come together to be able to work on making that a reality.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Joseph, and I live in the small town of New Hampton, 30 miles north of here. And I'm concerned about the $15 an hour wage. It's severely outdated. A long time ago, the Wall Street Journal indicated that had the minimum wage kept up pace with the rate of inflation, it would be over $20-some an hour today. Yeah. And it seems like 15 an hour seems to have a value of 7 1/4 an hour to me. Mm-hmm. A family of 4 can barely survive on $600 a week. When you consider that's a family of 4. Yeah. So my thinking is we got to change it to a living wage, something that helps to stimulate the economy. Yeah. And what happens? The economy improves, the income improves, it's going to reduce the welfare assistance program and Medicaid. I'm hoping that that direction would be a reduction of the burdens on the taxpayer, which would then further stimulate the economy. So what are your ideas of proposing a minimum wage reflecting living wage rather than just 15?
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert. I couldn't agree more. I think that as we look to how far we are behind on wages and the minimum wage in this country, yeah, certainly $15 is a good place to start, but it doesn't reflect the reality that there are very highly varying costs of living depending on where you live in the country, right? So in some places, $15 is a big jump, will be a big help. In other places, it doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what a true living wage would be. My home state of Hawaii is one such community and state. I mean, it's hard to find even a one-bedroom to rent that's less than $2,000 a month. So when you look at what a living wage is in Hawaii, it's going to be a lot higher than $15 an hour. If you look at what a living wage might be in, I don't know, a rural community in the Midwest or in the South where they have a much lower cost of living, where you can rent a house for maybe $600 or $700 a month, $15 will go a lot farther there than in a place like Hawaii or San Francisco or other places, in communities here in New Hampshire. So I think it's right to approach this as a living wage, and I think your take on this and seeing how this is actually a stimulus for our economy, where people will not be forced to look to public programs to be able to help fill the gap that currently exists because they're not able to earn enough money, is a really powerful argument. I agree. I don't have anything else to add to that. You make a very strong argument.
Hi, I'm Betty Thomas. I work for New Hampshire Employment Security as a hearing officer. You talked tonight in your campaign about foreign policy decisions and the need to invest more here at home. And these are issues that are very important for our state employees. Oh, sorry. Every day in our jobs, we see the consequence of underfunding and understaffing positions, especially in everything from road and bridge repairs to maintenance to caring for our most vulnerable children and our families. As president, how would you ensure that federal and state funding gets directed to important priorities here at home?
Yeah. Well, thank you. You know, as you've pointed out, it starts with redirecting our resources and our priorities to really where they're needed most. We can then continue beyond that by working closely, federal government, state government, and local government to help make sure that those priorities are being set and really directed by the state and the local government, who knows best where those resources can make an impact. I think, again, coming from having worked on the city council, having worked as a member of the state legislature in Hawaii, you know, there's a healthy tension there between the rules, the regulations, and a lot of the restrictions that come along with federal dollars that get to the state that make it very difficult sometimes to make sure that, hey, you're just getting those resources to where they are needed most. So I think that there needs to be a better relationship there, and being able to communicate what those needs are and to be able to get access to those federal funds to fill the gap that often exists within local and state government funding. Yeah, I mean, look, investment in every single one of these areas, we are so far behind. You mentioned a few of them, I'll add a few more. Clean water, we were in Merrimack the other day, and just having confidence that you can trust the quality of the water coming out of your tap is something that they don't have, that a lot of other communities don't have, that families in Flint, Michigan still don't have. Kids are being poisoned by the water that's coming out of their faucets. In the United States of America, the wealthiest nation in the world, it's crazy. It is absolutely unacceptable. We have to do better. You deserve better. Our families and our kids deserve better, which is why this is so critical, that we see our taxpayer dollars and make sure that they are actually going towards serving the best interests and well-being, serving the needs of the people of our country, and making sure that that is at the forefront of the decisions and the priorities of funding that we are setting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You, yes. Hi.
Hi.
My name is Gene Boyce. I work with the certification unit over at the Department of Health and Human Services. We are the group that goes around to healthcare facilities around the state of New Hampshire to make sure that the facilities are in compliance with CMS regulations.
Okay.
One of the big problems that we have encountered is that a lot of these facilities are having problems with staffing. And part of the staffing problem is the low wages that are being offered these employees, not just with county homes, but homes throughout the whole state. And what is going to be done to go ahead and increase the reimbursement rate for these facilities so that they can start guaranteeing that they're giving the dignity and respect that our elders deserve?
Yeah. Thank you, and thanks for the work that you're doing. I think this has to be a core element and component of the overall healthcare reforms that we need to see in this country. We see how in many communities across the country, physicians, doctors are refusing to take more Medicare and Medicaid patients because of these low reimbursement rates. You've mentioned the challenges and the problems that you're seeing here. When we look at the influence that big insurance and big pharma have over the healthcare policy in our country, we see how those limited resources that are making it very difficult for those who are working in the industry to be, who are working in the homes that you're talking about to serve the most vulnerable, are so restricted and limited, yet we have big insurance and big pharma walking out with massive profits. We can see once again where the priorities are so twisted in how we are spending money and how our taxpayer dollars are being used. I support having a single-payer healthcare plan that guarantees healthcare for every single quality healthcare for every single American. And making sure by doing so, hey, we're able to bring down the cost of what we are paying for healthcare in this country and ensure that it is quality healthcare, and make sure that we are leveraging the power that we have as the largest purchaser of prescription drugs in the world to negotiate lower drug prices, further bring down that cost, and make sure we're dedicating those resources once again to those gaps in those areas of need where the most vulnerable who are suffering as a result of our current system. There's been a lot of conversation about, okay, well, what role does private insurance play in this? I look to the model of Australia as an example where they are spending less than we do on our healthcare system, yet they are seeing better health outcomes. They guarantee quality healthcare for every single person in their country. They allow for private insurance. They have some nonprofit insurance options for those who want to purchase into those systems. I think that's fine. They've proven that it does not undermine our ability through what I call a single payer plus plan, to be able to make sure that guaranteed, no matter where you work, how much or how little you have in your pocket, what your health condition is, you will get the quality health care that you need. Hang on. You're getting your steps in tonight.
Representative Gabbard, thank you very much for coming and talking with our union today.
Thank you.
My name is Garrick Raskamp and I work at the Fish and Game Department. I have several questions, but I'm going to follow up on the healthcare one.
Yes.
In the reading that I've done, the pharmaceutical companies are actually only about 15% of the expense of our healthcare system. Hospitals actually are 30% of it, and that doesn't include any of the doctors or anything that's in there. The major expense actually are the middlemen, the middle companies, the people who are supposedly keeping our costs low. They take up about 40% of the expenses that we pay. So my question is, how do we rein those people in? Because there's no regulations to say how that works.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of kickbacks and subsidies that go back and forth that are invisible to us.
Yeah.
So how do we make that? I mean, the current administration has put forward, transparency, but that's not touching any of the, in between. So how do we bring that to light so that we can understand really where these costs are going?
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's a really important point, and I think transparency is a huge element of this, so that we can see where the dollars are going and what it's being spent on, what's necessary versus what is being driven really just by a desire for more profits. But I think that this cost that you're referring to is directly linked to their relationship with big insurance and big pharma. So when we're talking about overhauling our healthcare system so that it is not one that, as it is today, is really being driven by corporate profits and greed, then we're going to be able to get to the heart of where these costs are coming from and the relationships and the connections that these hospitals have with the big insurance companies and with big pharma, whether they're kickbacks or other things that are happening that are further driving the cost of the delivery of healthcare up. We can't get to these problems if we don't actually get to an inside look and have that transparency to see where these dollars are going and exactly how they are being spent, either to serve the best interest of the patient and the quality of care, or are they just, expanding or inflating the so-called administrative costs that go into the pockets of the executives. This is a little bit of a different topic, but we're seeing a lot of the same thing in higher education as well. The ever increasing rates of tuition. We're not seeing, hey, well, okay, the tuition rates are going up, therefore there are better outcomes, right? That our kids are graduating, they're able to get a job with a good pay in the field of their choosing. No, we're seeing a lot of this inflation in expenses and costs at the administrative level, not linked to an increasing quality of the delivery of that education. So I think once we peel back the layers, we can get to the heart of the root cause of the problem so that we can begin to solve it and make sure that our priorities are lying in the well-being of our people, whether they be patients, those who are needing care, or our students in our education system.
Straight back. Yep.
Sam?
Congresswoman Gabbard, thanks for coming here and thanks for your service.
Thank you.
My name is Stan Frieda and I'm an educator. I work in the Department of Education. I'm also on the Political Education Committee here at the SEA. Thanks for responding to our candidate survey that we sent to you. In your response to our question on your record about labor bills you've sponsored in Congress, you talked about the need to shift to a green energy economy and working with labor unions to establish job training programs and workforce development programs and as part of that program. Can you tell us how under your Gabbard administration you'd ensure that any major investment in the green energy economy would really prioritize good union jobs?
Yeah, thank you. Working in partnership and working side by side with unions who are at the forefront and at the cutting edge of apprenticeships that are providing that kind of quality training that is preparing people for the workforce, I think is a central component to this. I've been with some of the building trades unions, for example, and they've talked about how quickly their apprenticeship programs are being filled up. Now they don't have enough slots available for all of the people who are really looking to join, who are looking for those very clear skills to be able to directly enter into the workforce. I think this is a huge underutilized asset that we have right here in our communities, that if we dedicated more resources towards and placed a higher emphasis on the value that's gained from those who go through these programs, then we'll be able to maximize that as we work on overhauling our infrastructure in this country, as we work towards building and laying the foundation for a new green energy economy and all of the changes that will be required to go within that. I think capacity is something that we've got to address to be able to continue to expand that to meet the demands of people who are looking to work in this area and to meet the demands of the kinds of changes that we need to see as we transition off of this archaic dependence on fossil fuels and instead really start making these investments in a new green energy economy that can create good paying jobs, that's good for our pocketbooks, will provide us with energy security, and oh, by the way, will actually start costing less than what we are used to paying in our dependence on fossil fuels.
My name's Eric Farron. I work for DOIT for the state. Thank you for being here, Representative. Recently, the Supreme Court, through the Janus decision, kind of really severely cut the budgets for a lot of the unions. And seeing that you are in favor of unions and for all, how do you see framing some of your legislation so that it makes it more difficult, and especially with the current makeup of the Supreme Court, keeping out of that type of support? And the second part of my question is, if you were able to select a new Supreme Court justice, what criteria would you use to choose to do that with? Thanks.
Thank you. Look, our country was founded on the basis and the strong foundation of our Constitution, which guarantees us freedoms and rights, equality and justice. It is important that our Supreme Court justices are those who are committed to upholding that Constitution, and not those who are coming in with a clear bias or partisan interest one way or the other, and that will see every American and treat every American fairly. I think that's the most important qualification that we should look for in those who are nominated, and that's what I would look for, in seeing those who are best qualified, and look at their track record, and look at the kinds of decisions that they've made in the past to ensure that that's truly the case. Unfortunately, that's not what we have now. This has become such a politicized process that, you know, the decision has already been predetermined about which nominee will be confirmed or denied based on which party is nominating that Supreme Court justice. You know, we look back not that long ago to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think she was confirmed with 94 or 96 votes in her confirmation, a strong bipartisan vote of support. In order to reform, in order to make sure that our Supreme Court is actually serving the interests of the people of our country, we've got to get back to that place where partisanship is taken out of it. Connected with that, to the first part of your question, I'm not a constitutional authority, but I think it's important as we're drafting legislation that seeks to protect the rights of working people and the rights of working people to join a union and collectively organize and make sure that you have that leverage to be able to negotiate with management, that we check the boxes and make sure that obviously it's not something that will be easily thrown out if challenged in court.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Stanley Brown, Tilton, New Hampshire. Do you support unionizing federal workers, and why or why not?
Yeah, I think that the protections that we're talking about, where every worker has the right to organize, also applies to federal workers. Making sure that whether you're working in a post office or in some other federal agency, that you're able to make sure that your voice is heard and that you're not left without a seat at the table, even when collectively bargaining with or negotiating with the federal government. There's no reason why federal workers should be treated in lesser status than the rights of every other worker in this country to do that. I think that's a fundamental thing, and I would stand up for and protect that right.
Hi, my name is Tamara Fina. I'm born and raised in New Hampshire, resident of the city of Franklin, election moderator for 28 years, former school board chair. I work for the Department of Education. I'm a union member, chapter president, wife, mother, and grandmother. And my daughter served in the Gulf War on the Bush. So I'd like to know, please give us examples of your labor-related activities regarding contract negotiating and union support in your elected positions, and talk about your votes bills sponsored. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that beautiful list of you and your background and all that you
I
do.
have more, but that's
That's the short version. I got you. I got you.
we don't have time.
Right. That's right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's an exhaustive list of legislation that I'm proud to have co-sponsored in Congress, and I have a very strong record of standing in solidarity with working men and women in this country, to include the time that I've served at state and local government. I think that the legislative record and score that I've gotten from the AFL-CIO, for example, is I think 94%. That gives you a little bit of a picture of the kind of work that I'm proud to have done in Congress. Look, at times when our teachers have been striking in my home state of Hawaii, I've been proud to walk the line with them. At times when our service workers, members of our Local 5 hotel workers union have been striking, making that strong statement that one job should be enough. I've been proud to walk that picket line with them. At times where working people have come at a standstill in their negotiations with management, I've been proud to send letters of support in standing and working with them. There are so many different challenges that are coming at us, whether they be in Congress, serving under the first 6 years in Congress under a Republican majority. There was a lot of legislation that came forward, whether it's related to the Jones Act in the maritime industry, right to work, and other issues. Time and time again, I've been proud to stand with working people in this country in fending off those attempts to undermine those rights. I think one other example I'll cite is supporting legislation that would strengthen the National Labor Relations Board and making sure that those who are appointed to that board are people who are actually going to stand up and protect labor.
I also add that my daughter is on the state police, so watch your speed.
Wow. Yes, ma'am. Got it.
Hello, Representative. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So I wanted to just back up a little bit. You had mentioned before about the will of the people and not removing a president who was voted in by the will of the people. However, I don't feel it was the will of the people since he did win the popular vote. I felt at that time that my vote did not count. So is there something that you would do or enact in your administration that would make us feel better about that whole situation?
Thank you. This is a really important question as we look at the next election that we have coming up, and as we are reminded of our democracy being based on a one-person, one-vote system. I think that the Electoral College needs to be reformed. There's ongoing debate. Maybe some of you will agree, maybe some of you won't, but some people are advocating for getting rid of the Electoral College because of the outcomes, like in the last election where the Electoral College was won, but the popular vote was lost in the case of this last election. We've seen it happen before, right? Here's why I don't support that. It's because of small states like mine and yours that would be deemed somewhat irrelevant in the election process. And I think that our voices deserve to be heard as much as everyone else's in this country, and it equalizes the election playing field. However, the system as it exists is broken for the reason that you're talking about. The winner-take-all system of the current Electoral College, says that if someone wins California, for example, with 55% of the vote, you get every single electoral vote from the state of California. I think that we need to reform the Electoral College so that it is proportional. So if I were to win California by 55%, I would get 55% of the electoral votes from that state. I think this would bring us closer to solving the issue and the concern that so many of us have that our vote isn't being counted, and the outcome of the election is not really reflecting the proportion of people who are voting for one candidate or another candidate. I think the beauty of this reform that I'm talking about also is that it's very doable. Getting rid of the Electoral College would require a constitutional amendment. Very difficult and very high bar to overcome, and I've stated why I don't think that would be the best outcome for us as a country. Reforming it, changing it from a winner-take-all system to a proportional one, does not require a constitutional amendment. I believe it requires 2/3 of states passing legislation saying that we want to make this change, and I think somewhere over 25, 26 states have already done so. So this is something that could be done pretty expeditiously to get us to that place where we have greater confidence that our votes will be represented in the way that they are cast, while still maintaining the original intention of the creation of the Electoral College, where every state has a say in the election, and candidates won't just focus all their time on California and Texas and Florida and New York. Right. They will never come to Hawaii. They hardly come to Hawaii now. So yeah, that's my answer to your question. Thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
I get nervous with public speaking, so please excuse my...
You're amongst family.
Right? Oh my goodness. And I'm on a wall too. So my name's Kim. I work for the Public Health Lab. Testing water and food, like the PFAS problem that we're having.
Yes.
I'm from Concord, and I'm a fellow HPUer.
No kidding.
Yes.
Wow.
So I loved the Jack Johnson music that was playing as
Awesome.
you came in. Yeah. So my question is...
HPU is Hawaii Pacific University, for those who wonder.
Sorry. Yeah. So my question is more about how, like, the end game of what I think a lot of us are on the same page as wanting to make a change in the Oval Office, and how to make that happen. And that there's a lot of different people running with a whole lot of differences. And my question is basically, how do we make sure we don't have a repeat of 2016? You were in the DNC, so you know a lot of people stayed home because of the division. And how do we make sure that for a probably brokered convention, we all come together? And will you please commit to helping bring the Democratic Party together and not tearing it apart, which is what I'm fearing is going to happen.
Even as there are, as you pointed out, differences in how we would approach solving problems, differences in leadership and experience and background amongst the Democratic candidates running for president, I feel confident in saying that we are united, especially in the need to defeat Donald Trump and win in November of 2020. I believe that I'm the best candidate to accomplish that, and I want to tell you why. We are living in a hyper-partisan atmosphere, especially in Washington and across the country. So many people stayed home in 2016 because maybe their candidate wasn't the nominee. A lot of frustration and feeling like the whole political system is broken and their vote doesn't count anyway, their voice won't matter in changing the outcome of the election, and frankly a lack of faith in both political parties and their leadership. You know, I've talked to people who voted for Trump because they just wanted to totally break apart this broken system in the hopes that something better may be rebuilt in the process. I've talked to people who stayed home because I talked to a woman last night. She shared how when she was in the polling booth, she stayed in there for a long time and she was just crying and crying because she didn't feel confident in casting her vote for either of the people who were on the ballot. And she said it was the first time in her life that she left that part of her ballot blank. In order for us to defeat Donald Trump in 2020. We've got to recognize how he won in the first place, why it is that so many people stayed home, why it is that people who voted for Obama twice then jumped and voted for Trump. We've got to get past this extremely divided culture in our country that we are living in now, where it's one party versus the other, constant attacks, and a whole bunch of people left in between saying, hey, what about us, guys? What about our health care? What about our kids' education? What about the things that we are worried about every single day? When are you guys actually going to start paying attention to us and working for the people of this country? So long as we have leaders in our own party who are completely dismissing and disrespecting either those who voted for Trump, those who stayed home, those who watch Fox News, those who disagree with us, then we will continue to lose. We will not be in a position to be able to fight for the things that we were talking about. The message that I've shared with you today about the leadership that I will bring as your president, where my first responsibility every single day will be towards serving the American people above all else, is the message that I'm bringing everywhere on this campaign. And we have Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and Libertarians coming together and supporting my campaign because of this love of country, this respect that I share with every single American, regardless of your background or who you voted before or anything else, saying we've got to come together to work for that better future for every single one of us. Yeah, of course, we're going to have different ideas on how best to accomplish things. We're going to be able to have a good debate on how we can do that. We'll take those ideas that we share, we'll see, okay, we'll disagree in these other areas, but we will get past the hyper-partisan divide that is standing in the way of progress now. Building this coalition of support now, not waiting until after the primary to say, okay, now we'll go and talk to these people, is what is enabling my campaign and for me to be the best candidate to defeat Trump in 2020, and to be able to begin to do the most important work of unifying our country, working across party lines, building those relationships based on respect so that we can actually do the people's work and solve problems that we face.
So, we're out of time for questions. We're out of time for questions, but before we go, we'd like to get a selfie with the Congresswoman, and then anyone that would like to get a group photo together. We're going to turn around and then have you stand, and we'll do a group photo. And then anyone that would like a selfie with the Congresswoman, if they can form a line over there after we get the group photo, we'd like to do that. Now I'd like to thank the Congresswoman.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you all so much. Thanks for everything that you're doing. Appreciate it.